to Counseling with TLC. Hey, today we're going to talk about stress and what stress is and how we manage it. So, what is stress? Stress is the body's physical and mental or emotional reaction to change. Any kind of change. Could be friendship change, school change, family changes. We're living in a time of change. Even the change of us not being able to be at school and us not being able to see friends, all of those things, us not being able to actually hear our teachers every day is change. And sometimes our bodies can have physical, mental, or emotional reactions to that. So, what are some of the things that cause us stress, besides what I've already mentioned? Well, there is that demands at school, the demands at home, because sometimes our parents are going to require more of us than our teachers are. There is also problems with friends. Bullying can cause stress. Sometimes grades can cause stress. So if we're worried about how we're doing, stressors are anything that cause the release of a stress hormone. So all the things that causes stress is what we call stressors. Okay, those things that cause this release of the stress hormone in our body. Physical stressors are things like when it's really hot or cold temperatures, injury or pain. And then we have a psychological stressor, which are all those things that affect maybe our emotions. Okay. So things like walking to a cafeteria when you don't know anyone, or when someone's bullying you, conflicts with friends, grief, anything that might be happening that evokes a negative emotional response. So stress in our body. Okay. Now, we've talked about how our brain works. We've talked about the hypothalamus. We've talked about the different glands in our brain. But the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is really what we're going to talk about today, because that's really where the stress comes from. It starts up here. So every battle that we fight with stress, with worry, with anything negative starts in our brain. So this autonomic nervous system, it regulates all the involuntary functions such as heartbeat, blood flow, breathing, and digestion. Those things are all affected by the stress that we endure. So this hypothalamus in our brain, it activates automatic nervous system, which helps the body to maintain kind of a calm state. So that means body temperature, sleep cycles, blood pressure, and other essential functions. It helps to keep it calm and level. But when we are under stress, what can happen is it will cause all of those things to go out of control. The pituitary gland, it's the master gland, it secretes hormones into the bloodstream. So all the hormones that run through our body that help to regulate lots of different things like our emotions, for one, that pituitary gland also then regulates the stress hormone. The adrenal glands produce the hormones. Okay, so that balances our blood sugars and maintains energy levels. Cortisol, that's the steroid hormone that helps the body respond to stress. So this is the stress hormone. If we are under too much stress and we can't get our bodies calm, it will produce too much cortisol, which is basically like sugar and the control of our blood pressure. So you can imagine if we are under too much stress, cortisol can be released in too high of a dose, and then it can cause harm to our body. So stress in the body. Here we go. Here's our brain. You can see where the hypothalamus is and where the pituitary gland is and where the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis kind of sits. So now, here we go. So we see all of these things and all of these glands in our body, and they're all affected. The hypothalamus sends a chemical message to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland sends a chemical message through the brain to the adrenal glands. Then the adrenal hormone, okay, gets released. The adrenal glands produce that. And then it flows through the blood, right? Binds to blood cells and then tells them what to do. It's a pretty amazing process, really. So it's kind of like a text message. So it says, hey, hypothalamus sends that message to the pituitary gland. Hey, PG, there's a stressor. It's a bear. Alert the others. Okay. You can imagine that's what it's doing. This is how the pituitary gland responds. On it. Hey, adrenals, release the cortisol. Adrenal glands, got it. Cortisol, get help, go help the cells, right? So he's sending the message. Cortisol, I'll save us all. So, stress in the body. There's the bear. 2, the hypothalamus sends the message to the PG, okay, to our pituitary gland. Pituitary gland sends the message to the adrenal glands, and then the adrenal glands release the cortisol into the bloodstream to give the body energy to deal with the stressor. Now, there's 3 responses that we have to stress: the fight, flight, or freeze response. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about how we have that response to anything negative that comes at us. So when we face a stressor, we do one of those 3 things. We fight, we run, or we freeze and do nothing and let whatever's happening affect us in a negative way. So this is a burning fire, obviously. There's a bear. There's water. Now this would be cool. Now this doesn't make me stress out. A shark, lightning, lion. Okay. Someone gossiping about you. Yep. And with you moving on to middle school for you 5th graders, this can happen a lot, especially when you're in hallways, and it can cause you some stress. For 3rd and 4th graders, I hope that we can refrain from doing this, but it does happen. So remember, when you are gossiping about someone, you are causing them undue stress. You're causing them to have that stress response. Someone comments something mean on your post. Now, we live in a day and age of technology. Some of you have TikTok. Some of you have Snapchat. Some of you have Instagram already. Okay. Some of you are using Messenger Kids. When someone comments something mean about something we post, it causes our stress levels to go up. We have a stress response. And our reaction can either be to fight, which means then we retaliate with mean words, which can make the situation worse, or we flee and we try to ignore that it even happened and we run, or we freeze and we don't tell anybody and we don't do anything about it. So when you have a ton of homework, okay, like maybe right now, having this distance learning is really stressing you out. Maybe it just feels overwhelming because you don't have access to your teachers like you did before, or you don't have access to your study buddy, which is like a peer that you use to bounce ideas off of. When you have that, that can increase that cortisol. It can increase that stress response. So cortisol's job, though, is to help the body respond to stress, process glucose, which is sugar, and control your blood pressure. However, in some people's bodies, if we have too much stress, it will overproduce and cause other issues. So why do we need cortisol when we face a stressor? Well, we need cortisol because it tells the body to use stored up glucose, that's sugar, okay? Just so that our heart can have energy so that we either fight or run away from the stressor. So we can fight the stressor with lots of different strategies, or we can run away from the stressor, which is trying to flee the situation that's causing us stress. So those are a positive way that we can respond to stress. Fight isn't always retaliating in a negative way. Fight sometimes is, how do we stand up in this stress? How do I get assertive and proactive in how I'm handling this? Or how do I leave the situation that's causing me stress? That doesn't make you weak. When you leave a situation that's causing you stress, that doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're whatever other negative word that someone might call you. It means you're doing what's best for your body. Cortisol tells the body to use the stored up glucose and basically convert it to energy so that we can either do all the things that we need to do, okay? But what if we freeze? Well, our bodies still produce the cortisol even if we freeze. But if we don't use the cortisol to fight or flight, the cortisol will build up in our bodies. And it can cause things like obesity, heart disease, inflammation, diabetes, and more, okay? Which is why I told you some people, if we have too much stress and we're not handling it, that's the negative things that can cause in our body. Chronic stress, constant activation of the stress response system causes wear and tear on the body. So some of us, if we're living in a home, right, where it's constant stress, maybe there's stress because of the situation right now. We have to find ways to get calm. So consider your stressors right now. What would each of these responses look like for you? So if you face the stressor head on, or do you run away from the stressor, or do you do nothing and let the stressor happen? What would you do? I'll give you a moment to think about that. All right. So how do we handle stress then? What do we do about it? There's a lot of things we can do to handle stress, and we've talked about this before. There are breathing exercises. You can go and do some walking or go for a run if you like to do that, jump on a trampoline, anything to get your mind off of what's causing you stress. And then remember, we've talked about setting goals, having a plan. So if maybe it's too much work or you're not sure how to get it all done, setting a plan of action for you so that you can get it done. Okay? If it's friendship stuff, maybe you need to use I statements more. Maybe you need to communicate how you feel. Maybe you haven't been doing that enough. Maybe that's the same thing with family. Maybe you just need to communicate your feelings better. Whatever it is, there are lots of strategies to fight stress. Do something you find fun, okay? Maybe it's a dance party in your room, whatever it might be. Maybe it's drawing pictures. Maybe it's just calling a friend on the phone just to hear their voice. You can email me as well. I sent out in my letter my cell phone number so you can call me if you want to just talk to me. If you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, that's why you have me. So I just want you to know there are physical things happening in our body that we don't even see. And if we're not handling stress in the right way, then it can be causing some other things to happen inside of our body. So it's super important that when we have things like those stress buttons that just keep getting pushed, we're fighting with our siblings, maybe it's stress at home, maybe it's too much homework right now, you don't know what's going on. For our fifth graders, we might have positive stress happening, which is thinking about middle school, what's it going to look like? And don't you worry, because I am going to have a lesson and talk about moving on to middle school for you fifth graders coming up here in the next couple of weeks. But regardless, find something positive to do, something that takes your mind off of it, something that calms your body and relaxes you. That will help you overcome some of those stresses. That's all for now. Till next time with Counseling with TLC. Miss you all. Love you.